have one session left, then the test. Next session we're going to talk about the tests in a lot more details to know exactly what will be on the test and how it will look like. For today we're going to finish the second part of what we started last time. We talked about teaching techniques old and new, and last time we started talking about the basics of teaching techniques. Today we're going to talk about some popular strategies. Some we've discussed before, we're going to go over them really quickly, and some a little bit new. And at the end we will give an introduction to teaching techniques that are part of next class, which is innovation in education. Innovative techniques, things that are just being used now, this year, things that we are experimenting on now, and something that I have experimented on the past week and yesterday with my students, and I'll show you some of the results next time. So let's start with our teaching techniques today. We're going to basically go over 12 main points, 12 things. We're going to talk about lectures, worksheets, questions, mimicking or echoing, role play, flexible grouping, think, pair, share, warm-ups, graphic organizers, body language, summary, and making connections. 12 popular teaching strategies that we should all know and change as we go on with our normal lessons and try to adapt them so they are useful in our classrooms. First lecture, the typical, most basic teaching method. To lecture, to deliver the information to the students. Students are either passive, just listening, or participating by answering questions or taking notes. There are some points about the lecture that we must know. Number one, keep it short. The shorter the lecture, the better. Most students are willing to actively listen and stay engaged by the teacher for a maximum of 15 to 20 minutes. So if we take all age groups, that would be a very safe average. 15 to 20 minutes is the maximum time that they will stay focused, listen to you, be engaged by the teacher. Now, let's remember two things we talked about before. Remember prime time and downtime from the session before last? We said in prime time and downtime that every lesson has prime time, which is when they learn the most, and downtime when they don't learn that well. And the shorter the learning episode, the more the prime time is. Remember, we took two examples, they were right here. The first one was for a 20-minute lecture, 20-minute learning episode. Has how many minutes of prime time? 18. 90%, exactly. 18 minutes, which is 90%. Then the other example was a 40-minute learning episode, the double. It would have only 30 minutes of prime time, which is 75%. So the longer the learning episode, or the longer the lecture, the less prime time we have. Something else. Remember when we talked about how we need to give synapse in the last session, and by synapse we meant naps. Okay, in the last session, exactly. And we said that the brain needs short breaks between learning episodes to process the information and form the connections between the neurons. Exactly. And this is the introduction to what we're going to be talking about next time, which is space learning, something I'm going to talk about at the end of today's session. So basically, when we keep our lectures for our teaching short, it becomes much more effective because we increase the prime time and because we give breaks to the brain in between the little mini lectures of my teaching, giving them the ability to form the connections and build the memory faster. Second thing, break it down. So maybe I have a long lecture, I have a whole chapter, something you want to teach that has a lot of information. I don't just have 20 minutes to teach, no. I have running lessons, 2 lessons, I have 80 minutes and I want to teach everything in the 80 minutes. Break down this one long lecture into several mini lectures, several small lectures, with different activities in between. So don't plan to lecture for a long time without little breaks of doing other activities, and then go back to the lecture, that's better. But one just long lecture, then one activity at the end is much less effective. Make it personal. If you can connect the lesson objectives to your students' needs or interests, what happens? Where did we see the word interest? It was right here. Remember? In a box.
The long-term memory.
No?
There
were 2 boxes, one here and one here. Smiling face and frowning face.
The active...
the thinking brain, exactly. Remember we said we reach the thinking brain when there is interest? So if I make my lesson interesting, okay, then they use their thinking brains. So make the lecture interesting. Okay, because if the lecture is boring, then they go to the other side of the diagram, if you remember, which is the reactive brain, exactly. Second thing, if relate it to your students' needs or interests, then you are giving the lesson meaning and relevance. And remember how we said I need to give what I'm teaching them sense and meaning? Because once they know why it is that way or they understand what it is, they start to form the long-term memory of it. Relevance also makes it personal. They feel that this lecture has to do with them. This teaching has to do with them. It's important to them. So relevance means important to them. These things guarantee better learning and retention. This guarantees that they will learn better and that they will retain the information longer. So they will always be prepared to learn the information you're giving them, and they will want to know this and they will have it in long-term memory. Now you as well have to be always prepared for a very important question, which is, why do we have to learn this? Okay? Why? Because this gives us meaning. Remember from the session before last, we talked about two things, sense and meaning. We said sense means what it is. I'm teaching you something, I want to know what it is. So tell me what it is. And meaning means, why is it that way? Or why do I need to learn it? Remember from the first assignment we talked about the solar system, the planets? Let's take this as an example. Now, we teach our students, for example, that the planets revolve around the sun. They orbit around the sun in an elliptical orbit, not a circular orbit. It doesn't look like a circle, it looks like an ellipse. And then just move on. Now here we've lost two things, sense and meaning. The sense, first of all, is to explain to them what an elliptical orbit is, what an ellipse looks like. Some of them don't know. How do we teach what an ellipse is? We either draw it or show them a picture, or we relate it to something that they know. They all know what an oval is, for example, or an egg. So this is how an ellipse looks like. Okay, it's longer from the top. So this is the sense. What about the meaning? They come and ask you a question. Why do the planets revolve around the sun? In an elliptical orbit. Why is it not a circular orbit? And sometimes we feel that this is a very hard question. But if you really think of it, you can find answers. For example, an elliptical orbit means that the planet Earth, for example, is at sometimes closer to the sun and sometimes farther from the sun, correct? Now this gives us the seasons. If it was a circular orbit, then the Earth would always be the same distance from the sun, so it would always be summer or winter, whatever. But when I have an elliptical orbit, that means sometimes I'm closer to the sun, so that's summer. Sometimes I'm far away from the sun, that's winter. Sometimes I'm between, that's fall and spring. So now they know why it's that way. Once you attach the meaning and the sense to something, it tends to stick in their long-term memories much better. Or, if you can't explain why it's that way, then you need to answer the question, why do we need to learn this? Okay? Now, I live in a country which speaks English and German, for example, only. And I have no intention ever to go to France. Why do I need to learn French? Why? You need to give them a reason. How can I give them a reason? Some research, some extra thinking, you'll find something. For example, let's say the student loves music, for example. French songs. French songs are wonderful French songs, very nice French songs, very famous French song. Give him a CD, give her a CD of some French songs to listen to. Now if you understand the words, it's really nice. French songs are very popular. Somebody likes to play a certain sport. Well, some of the best clubs or the best trainers in the world are from France. So if you learn French, you'll be able to. For example, okay? So think of a reason to give them why they need to learn this. If I can't tell them why they need to learn it, then at least I need to explain why it is that way. Okay, why do we put an E at the end when it's French for masculine and feminine? Why do we put an E at the end? Why? Give them a reason. Okay? Try to give them a reason. It's really hard. I'm asking really hard questions. But I'm sure if you think of them, you'll be able to find answers. But be prepared.
White business.
Okay.
Maybe someday they will visit Paris.
Yes,
They
maybe.
have to.
Who knows? Also, there's something else. You know, there are core standards. If you search on the internet, for example, grade 7 English, core standards. In the United States, at least. They have these standards for each grade level for every subject. This is what they need to learn, this is what they need to learn, all of the standards for all of the years. Now, you'll find within these standards sometimes an explanation to why it is important to teach this particular part in 7th grade or in 8th grade or in 5th grade. Sometimes you'll find these answers. Why is this important to learn? You'll find it there. So try to research. And you'll be surprised if you actually put in this question on Google, for example. Why do I need to learn about the solar system? Why do I need to learn about World War II? Why do I need to learn poetry? Why do I need to learn French? Something like that. You'll find lots of answers. Some of them may be really convincing that you can use. So be prepared. Work for an Oscar. You're an actor, but you're also the director. You're also the writer. You have control over the whole lecture. It's entirely up to you. So do your best to have a lecture as perfect as possible. Try to win an Oscar using your lecture. Your enthusiasm, be enthusiastic. Your body language, the way you walk, the way you talk. And use of classroom, keep your students engaged and interested. Okay? So when we have a lecture, we keep it short. We break it down into shorter learning episodes. We make it personal, give it relevance, give it sense, give it meaning. Try to answer the question, why do we need to learn this? And finally, perform the lecture as best as you can. Use the classroom, use the space you have, use your body, use the movement, use enthusiasm in order to keep your lesson or your lecture engaging and interesting. Second teaching method we're going to talk about today is worksheets. Now, you will realize that I started with lecture and then worksheets, because sometimes most teachers usually just use both, lectures and worksheets. That's the only two methods of teaching that we know how to use. They are very valuable, but they're not the only two. Worksheets. Now, there are two major types of worksheets, and each has a specific purpose. And this is something a lot of us really don't realize, that worksheets are not all the same. They have different purposes. There are basically two types. One is the knowledge level worksheet. Remember Bloom's taxonomy?
Yeah.
Knowledge or remembering was the first step, and then it goes higher until creation, synthesis. The knowledge level worksheet. The best uses for this type of worksheet are to build repetition into a lesson. Remember last time we talked about repetition rehearsal, said there's rote rehearsal and elaborative rehearsal, and provide students with additional practice. So I'm teaching them today how to add two one-digit numbers. So 1 plus 1, 1 plus 3, 5 plus 4, 4 plus 3, 4 plus 4, 2 plus 1, 1 plus 6, two one-digit numbers, okay? So I give them a worksheet that has a lot of questions on this particular part. This is called a knowledge level worksheet. We're focusing on rehearsing or repeating the information they've learned today. This type of worksheet focuses on rote rehearsal. We talked about this last time. Rote rehearsal means repetition. Rehearsal just on the knowledge level. To rehearse the information exactly as it was inserted into our brains. So it works with things like poetry, for example. When I want to memorize a poem, this is rote rehearsal. I keep on reading the poem over and over and over again until I memorize the poem. Can I say the first stanza and then the third one and then the second? No, it needs to go in order. This is rote rehearsal. I rehearse things in order. I memorize them in order. Just as I would with the names of the planets in the order. Just as I would with a poem. Just as I would with something that needs steps. I have to do this as step 1, step 2, step 3, an experiment, for example, in science. The higher level thinking worksheet, which is what goes a little bit above Bloom's taxonomy, these worksheets require the students to synthesize or to create information. What is synthesis or creation? Which step was it of Bloom's taxonomy? The final, the last one, the top. In order to synthesize or create information or ideas or opinions or data, or to construct and defend a new thought or solution. So to be able to argue, to create, to support a new thought or a new solution, something higher, something different, something you're going to create something in. It is a worksheet, it has questions, but it leads at the end to the creation of something new. It's not very simple and straightforward. This type of worksheets focuses on collaborative rehearsal. What is collaborative rehearsal? It's rehearsing how I can use this information and understanding of the information. So it's a higher level of worksheet. Now, if you look at these two types, which do you think is the best type to use for homework, and which is the best type to use in class?
The first one,
First
and
homework, first one homework, second one first.
Okay, here we have two opposite opinions now. Who would like to add more? Christina, do you agree or disagree with me?
I agree with that.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Okay, Ms. Anna, you have to agree with Ms. Dana because that's same name. What do you think?
I'm sorry, I didn't get that.
Okay, one more time. We have two types. Which is better for homework and which is better for classwork? Which of these two do you think we should give as homework and which of these two should we do in the classroom together?
it depends about the subject.
No, in any subject. We talk about two types. One here is really straightforward. It's about the information that you just got. The other one needs them to think a little bit more and develop
Shouldn't I reach
opinions
all
and
levels
ideas.
in class? So,
Excuse me?
shouldn't I reach all levels in class?
Yes.
So I can test this one in class. Give this as homework to put in the long-term memory.
Okay, exactly.
Well, this is
This is the same way, okay? Huh?
Steady
also?
Okay.
Okay. You want to change your mind, Miss Anna? It's on you now.
They have more time to think at home.
This is the only problem. Thank you. I personally would agree with what they said at the beginning. This is actually used for homework more. However, this needs a lot of time. But the problem is that we teachers always say they have more time at home. The problem is, will they be able to do a higher level worksheet on their own at home, even though they have enough time?
If it's
Or will they-
longer, it's steps. I mean, you can check the steps till they reach the final thing. So then you can give them
most probably.
Okay, but now it has turned into a formative assessment, where you're giving them steps and you want them to give you back, but you're not going to grade it. You're not going to give them grades.
No.
Here you're trying to see how far they are able to reach in order for you to change
Most probably,
your
if it's going to
teaching. Yes.
take, most probably, if it's going to take them a lot of time at home, mommy will still do it. Mommy is going to say what's the answer.
Somebody may
Yeah.
give them the answer right away.
But if they are stuck in school, the teacher they will not leave until they do it. They will do it.
Okay, great. So let's wrap this all up. Why is this better for home? Let's just talk about it in a way. We never, actually maybe here this is what we do, but in school this is not what we do. We never give one lesson about one chapter, just one lesson, and finish it all today, and then tomorrow do something else entirely new. It's all connected to each other. So if I introduce something new today, we're still using the knowledge level, the very first level. And today I want to reinforce the idea that they understand, or that they remember, or know the information. So I give them this type of homework, a knowledge level worksheet, so that they can rehearse using rote rehearsal at home, and so the information sticks in their long-term memory. So when they come tomorrow, I guarantee that they have the first 1 or 2 steps, the remembering and understanding well. Then I go a little bit higher and use higher level explanation and give them this as a class work, higher level worksheet, and help them and go around while they're answering the worksheet. Give them help, have them work together in groups or whatever. Once I know that they can perform this in front of me in class and understand everything till the last level, then like Ms. Diana said, I can give them a longer, higher level thinking worksheet at home where they have more time to do. But first I need to be sure that they're able to reach this level in my classroom. So this should be the first step, then this second step inside my classroom, and then afterwards I can give them the higher level thinking as homework. Now one thing we do wrong in the slide before is sometimes we think that the worksheets that we have in our practice books or homework books that come with our textbooks are very easy. They're very similar, they're very easy, they're too straightforward, it's very simple. So I have to go on the internet, for example, or I write my own worksheets to make it a lot more difficult. It's good to go and make worksheets that are more difficult. But first give them the simple worksheet to make sure that they know the basic information before trying to give them something more difficult. Once they can do this well, then you can give harder work. Second thing is questioning. Now, questioning can be used as a teaching technique. Remember, today we're talking about teaching techniques. So, we usually use questioning for exactly as assessment, not as a teaching technique. We question our students in order to know what they know and what they don't know, to assess their learning and give them grades, perhaps, like a test. But I can actually use questioning as a method of teaching. And we have 2 types of questions. We have primary questions, and then we have clarifying questions. Primary questions are the questions that you start by asking right away. For example, if I want them to recall something, to remember something, I ask them who? Who was the first king of Spain? That's a question, okay? What? What was the name of the country that was responsible for so-and-so? When? When did the battle of so-and-so happen? So this is all basic information. I want them to compare and contrast. So how is the First World War similar to or different from the Second World War? Give me 3 examples, or give me 3 points. Identifying the main idea. How would you summarize the most important facts in your own words? Write a summary about this story, about the novel, about chapter 1. Summarize. These are questions that we start with. They can either be written or oral. But then comes clarifying questions, and these are so important. Clarifying questions are very important because of our time constraints in our lessons, we always feel that we don't have enough time. We usually skip clarifying questions. So we ask a question. Who was the first king of Spain? And then somebody raises their hands and answers. And we say, okay, very good. We go on another question. You have just lost a very important technique. Once you have an answer, ask another question, and another question, and another question, and have the questions lead to each other, to the same student or to other students. For example, tell me how this idea is different from another idea. So, what was the main reason for the Second World War? Somebody gives an answer. You don't just say, okay, good job, you say, okay. Can you tell me how this reason was different from the reason for the Second World War or the First World War? Okay, give me the answer. Oh, okay, I'm curious to know more about Hitler. You just said Hitler. What do you know about him? Clarifying question. Oh, so you're suggesting that Hitler was actually right in doing what he did at the beginning? No, I'm not. Why aren't you? You are? Why are you? Okay, have the questions evolve. Is that similar to something else or is that different? Is there an easier way to explain how? Give them a statement or an explanation. Can you describe the answer that you just gave me in your own words? What is the meaning of one of the words that you just used in the answer? And you can ask other questions. So questions lead to other questions. Once you use clarifying questions, here you are doing something extremely important. It is building the connections between one neuron and the other. The dendrites, the axons, remember that? When I ask so many questions and the students are answering, not only are the ones answering benefiting, everybody else listening, they start to connect things together. They connect the First World War to the Second. They connect what he just said to the meaning of this word. They connect how similar it is or different to something else. And so it makes more sense at the end. So the more questions we ask, especially clarifying questions, the better results we're going to have at the end.
I start my lesson this way.
As a discussion at the beginning, asking questions about something you already explained or something?
Already explained.
Okay, so you can start or you can end, same thing. You can use it as a summary technique at the end, or you can begin a new lesson by asking about questions from before. Any way you do it, it starts to make these connections. Sometimes you can do something else. Ask clarifying questions that not only connect the parts of your topic or your chapter or your subject together, but things having to do with their personal lives or with the world around them. Giving them the sense and the meaning and the relevance we were talking about. So not forcing it to them. This is exactly like what's happening in this country today. Instead, ask them, how do you think this is similar to what's happening now? How do you think it's different? Why is it different? Why is it similar? Have them think about it and answer. Now you've formed so many connections in their brains, something has got to stay and then in the long-term memory be there forever. Mimic or echo. Okay, now this is one of the stranger teaching techniques. A lot of teachers do not use, but it's very effective, although it's time-consuming. The teacher asks the student to create a response, to give me an echo, in their own words, to a certain topic explained by the teacher or to a response by another teacher. Okay, so I choose one of my students. I want you to come stand up here. It doesn't have to be that way. You can do it seated in his or her seat, but come stand here in front of me. I want you to explain this particular point or definition, something I just explained a little while ago, in your own words. But be sure to include all the information that I did. And feel free if you want to mimic or echo it, to mimic me, okay? The way I talk, the way I walk, okay? So make it a little bit fun. Now, if you do this every now and then, but a lot, and you do it randomly, it will have them so focused in everything that you say or do, because they know that at any time you'll ask them to stand here and repeat what you just said. So they try to focus so much because they know that you might just call for them right now. They don't just focus on the final answer. They focus on the whole thing. Students are trying to mimic a thought or a concept that was previously presented, either by the teacher or the student. So I can say, okay, he just answered the question. Can you answer the question the same way he did? Can you say the exact same thing he did? When the students rework the event in their own words, they're trying to go over everything that's been said. And then they need to say it in their own words. So we tell them you can't say it the exact same way I did. You have to use your own words. This here gives them the sense of translation. They're trying to translate what they heard into something else they'll say. And this needs really intense thinking and works so many connections in the brain, having them really understand what it is you're saying. Because not only do you have to listen to what I'm saying as facts, you have to understand it and try to reword it in your own words. When the students who work the event in their own words, they perform useful rehearsal and give the information relevance, because now it's personal, I have to say it in my own words. This method makes the lesson fun and increases students' attention as they get prepared to be asked to mimic what is being taught. If everybody in my classroom knows that at any time I'm going to ask them to mimic or echo something that I just said or one of the students said, they will pay extra attention. Mimicking builds student involvement and repetition into a lesson. First of all, it involves your students, so they're active. Second of all, it involves repetition, rehearsal, because the thing that was being said by the teacher is being said one more time, or twice, or 3 times. Role play. Research indicates that play and drama contribute to learning and cognitive development in a number of ways. And for those of you who teach English, you probably know that when you teach them a play, it's so different when you teach them the play from the book, when they're just reading the play, or when you have them actually act the play. When they act the play, they are aware of so many things. They're not only aware of the words being said, they're aware of the personality of the character. They're aware of the setting where the whole play is happening. They're aware of the reactions of the other actors or the other characters in the play. It gives them so much understanding of the play as a whole, other than just simply reading it from the book. Role-playing personalizes teaching and allows students to be creative while learning. Students become the part that they are acting, and thereby give interest and relevance to the topics they are learning. For example, again, one more time, because Ms. Diana made so much effort with the solar system, we're going to keep on using this example till we're done. If I'm going to teach them about the solar system, now role play doesn't have to do with only drama or English or French or languages, or history. All of you actually can use role play. It's great.
I saw several role plays, even on YouTube, acting the war.
Exactly. And they even wear certain clothes and they use certain things. It involves so many things when you role play. So we can use this, for example, as the sun. Okay? And then my students are the planets. Now, if they understand the whole thing, all you need to do is name each one of them a certain planet. Okay? And have them revolve around the sun. Now, when they do revolve around the sun, they need to put into consideration many things. Number one, where they will stand in order. So they need to know the order. Second thing, the direction which they will revolve. Will they go like this, anti-clockwise or clockwise? Do you know? Anti-clockwise. Okay, correct. Okay. Third thing, don't the planets like Earth revolve around themselves as well? So he'll have to be actually turning around himself while turning around. Right? Now, if they understand, if they do this, they have just employed so much information in just one simple activity. The information of the order, the direction of the rotation, how they rotate around themselves, and how they rotate around the sun. Also, the shape of the orbit is an elliptical orbit, so it's not a circular orbit, which means when you're closer to the sun, you need to do like this. But when you're far away from the sun, you need to do like this. Now let's act it out. If they're able to perform all of this, you've just reached the last level of Bloom's creation. They've created something. They role-played this whole concept, and now they will know it forever perfectly. They will never get the question wrong when it comes to planets orbiting the sun. To make role-playing successful, though, the teacher must plan the activity well, very well. So if I'm going to use the activity I just mentioned right now, I need to know where the sun is going to be. I need to put it in a place in the classroom where there's enough space for my 8 students or my 9 students to go around it. Second of all, I need to be sure that it's put in a way where you can make it as an ellipse. So if you put it in the center of the room, it's going to be a little bit hard. But if you put it here, like this, and all of this is empty, you're forcing them to sometimes be far away, and sometimes they have to be close, because afterwards there's a wall. So you're forcing the shape of an ellipse. If you're going to call each one by a certain planet, maybe you can try to use their own first initials if you have so many names in the classroom. So that way nobody's going to say, no, why me? I want to be Mercury, why C, Mercury, not me, something like that. You can have them as name tags or something ready so they can put it right away. So I need to plan for the role play well, so it doesn't become chaos. And explain the boundaries of the activity. I have to explain that we need to finish this in exactly 1 minute or 2 minutes. So it's not, we're not going to stay all day playing musical chairs. Yes, exactly. Okay, we're just going to do it once for 1 minute or 2 minutes, and we're going to sit down right away. Achieving a proper routine for role play requires teacher-led training and practice. Role play can be done as a routine in my classroom. When they know that once I do this, we're going to role play right away. For example, music, like we said before. If I turn on the music, okay, that means now it's time for our role play, like musical chairs. Once the music is off, then we sit down at our seats and we continue our lesson as it is. So if you want to put it as a routine, try to put something where you don't have to every time, okay everybody, now we're going to do a role play, this is what we do, these are the rules. No, they already know the routine, and you start right away. Flexible grouping. Flexible grouping was one of the teaching techniques that we discussed in our earlier course, the IEC. And I remember a lot of you did not really like the idea. And again, these are not ideas that are good or bad necessarily. They are teaching techniques that are being used and have been used for years. Whether you agree or not with them will actually depend on your actual character and on the students that you teach. What flexible grouping basically is that we divide students into groups based on their levels. So, if I have very high achieving, high level students, I put them in one group. Those who are really slow or don't learn that well or have problems, we put them in another group. Those who are average, we put them in a third group, for example. And are given tasks that suit their levels. So, we don't give very easy tasks to those who are very clever, and we don't give difficult tasks to those who have problems. Okay? So we give easier tasks for those with problems, we give average tasks to average students, and we give harder tasks to better students. Now, teachers must make sure that the students realize that each group is an essential part of the overall activity. They need to realize that the end result of my activity must have 3 parts. Part by group A, part by group B, and part by group C. And that these parts, when put together, will form the final project, the final thing we're going to hang, the final idea about today's lesson, whatever it is that you're doing as group work. So that you give each group its importance. So nobody feels I'm in the important group, or I'm in the easy group, or the slower group, or whatever. Because once they feel that way, then you've lost the idea of having the flexible group. However, some teachers say, no way. This way they're going to think that they're smart and the other ones were stupid, and then they're going to have jealousy and it's going to be a big problem. Well, if you don't do it that way, what usually happens is the one smart, clever student in the group of 5 or 6 is the one working and is making fun of the others, and the others feel humiliated. So it's the same thing. Okay? Here at least I'm making sure that every group is doing his or her own work. Now, let's say you don't want to even make it difficult and easy, so they don't feel that way. Maybe it's about time. Maybe I can give the smarter students a 20-point project to finish, whereas I give the average students 10 points to do, and the slower ones just 5 points. But they're all equally difficult. But this just needs more time, so I give it to the faster students. That's it. This was flexible grouping. Think, pair, share, also something we discussed before. Basically what it is, we go into 3 steps. Number 1, we ask a question, we introduce a topic, and we have each one of the students think by himself or by herself for a certain amount of time. Let's say 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Then each should generate his or her own response. Then we pair each 2 students together, each 2 sitting next to each other, form a pair together, discuss their answers, convince each other, and choose one best answer. And then they share it with the classroom. Or, as we said before, here at the end, we can use the think, pair, share, square method, where each 2 pairs join at the end, so making groups of 4. So basically what you've done, instead of starting by dividing your classroom into groups of 4, you had each one work by himself first, so making sure everybody's working. Then, the 2 together are working and explain to each other and help each other. And then they become groups of 4, finding one good answer at the end. So this way, I ensured that everybody was working at some point, instead of starting right away with 4. Warm-ups. A warm-up is the first thing students do as soon as the class begins. Now, for people who play sports, any kind of sports, they always say that warm-ups are very important. If you play right away, you're probably going to be injured. You need to warm up first before being immersed in what you're doing. It's the same thing with our students. They need to warm up first before being immersed in the lesson that they are being taught. It's the first thing students do as soon as the class begins. A warm-up focuses the students' attention. It tries to get their minds away from what they were doing before you entered the classroom to what you're doing right now. Because they may have had a test right before you came. They might have had a very enjoyable lesson and they're thinking of all the fun things they did. They may have just come out of break, so they're thinking about break and everything that has happened during break. Maybe in the morning and they're thinking about on their way to school, or they're sleepy, or maybe at the end of the day when they're thinking about everything that's been happening today. I need to bring them to my science lecture, to my English lesson, to my history lesson, to my French lesson. I need to bring them here. Warm up first. A warm-up provides the teacher with time to quiet and take attendance. So I have them busy doing something, getting them into the mood, while I quietly finish any paperwork I need to finish and then start my lesson right away. Of course, as we said, remember the primacy-recency effect? We said the very beginning and very end of the lesson are very important. So I shouldn't waste the beginning of the lesson with that paperwork unless they are doing something important. Graphic organizers. Graphic organizers connect various topics of one lesson or of more than one lesson together. We're going to talk today about 3 popular graphic organizers. 2 we did before, which are the Venn diagram, the Frayer model, and a new one today we're going to introduce, which is the KWL chart. Now, before we move on to the 3 charts, what is the importance of graphic organizers? Who are giving ideas?
Organizing their thoughts.
Organizing their thoughts.
Brainstorming. It's bringing ideas. It's
brings in more ideas than what you already have prepared. Yes.
Connecting ideas.
Exactly. The most important part of graphic organizers is that it not only focuses their thoughts and organizes their ideas, it makes connections between what they've learned now, what they've learned before, what they want to learn afterwards. It makes these connections in the mind. And it uses a visual method. So it's not only oral, it's not only for auditory learners. You also include something visual, increasing the memory of what you remember. And this is a method we're going to use in our test. I don't know if I should tell you this now or not. I should tell you, right? And this test for the MEC is going to be a little bit different than the test before, from the test before. In the IEC, it was all multiple choice questions, remember? It's also going to be some multiple choice questions very similar to the ones we had before, okay? But this time I'm going to include questions that use connections in your brain to what we actually took exactly the way it is visually. Meaning, you will have a slide in front of you, a page that has one of the slides that we've already taken. Say Bloom's taxonomy, for example. With the steps of Bloom's taxonomy, with 1 or 2 of the steps blank. And you need to choose what should be put here. It's the same thing as asking you a multiple choice question. But the difference is that here now we're using also our visual link and connections. And hopefully what I want to prove by this is that you will find it much easier to solve a test like this. This is something I've been experimenting with my students recently, just a couple of days ago. Give them the test or the questions from the actual slides that you are teaching them. You will be surprised at how well they remember the information, especially if it's organized. Remember when we have charts and trees and things like that? Give them that same thing with blanks. If they remember, that means they remember the whole flow of that flow chart or that tree or that branch. They really understand it better than just giving them a question.
Like remembering maps.
Exactly, like remembering maps.
I gave an example in my homework.
Yes.
Yes,
That's true. I was going to share that next time, but you give us an idea about it.
The new one or the old one? Because I gave an example.
Whichever you want. Give an example to the rest of the class.
I was teaching grade 11 an article called The Entire Woman, and I was speaking about the
Sojourner.
Yes, Sojourner Truth, and I got them a video about the author's life.
Okay.
And I gave them questions, and they had to answer it through the video.
And how well did they answer?
They loved it.
Exactly.
They loved it.
It's really effective when you use that. Really, really effective. So we're going to experiment that with the test, okay? It should be easy, don't worry. So anyways, graphic organizers link the visual part to what we've learned, and they help organize the thoughts. And then graphic organizers can either be given to students at the end of the lesson, can be given at the beginning of the lesson, talking about brainstorming like we just did a little while ago, or I prefer to give them graphic organizers sometimes the whole lesson. So give it to them at the beginning, and as the lesson evolves, whenever they learn something new or they have something else they understood, they write it down in their graphic organizers. And then at the very end of our lesson, we compare our graphic organizers together and make sure everybody has all the information.
We have in my English books, in the grade 10 and 11, they have something called foldables.
Yes.
Every time they take a new lesson, they have to do a folder.
Yes. Yes. Do you actually do them? Yes, we don't, because we don't have time. But
I'm
it's,
using every time I have writing.
you use these
Yes, even
folders?
in the exam, they have to be graphic organizer.
Okay. And
It's a mark. They have marks for graphic organizer.
that's the only way to use it effectively. When you have to do it, you do it every time, you put it on the test, that way.
Even when
They
they
know it
have
has
to
to be
write
done.
at home something, they have a writing assignment, they ask, should you do the draft and the final copy, or I said, no, it's a must,
Graphic.
start with the graphic.
Oh, that's the one where you have the topic and the
No,
characters and examples,
depending
whatever
on
it
the
is.
topic,
Okay.
because I'm using all of them.
In compare and contrast, we
Yes.
see Venn diagram.
Sequencing and the cause effect and all this, and they,
It's really important.
yes.
And it starts to teach them something very important. How to organize their thoughts. How to think in a way afterwards when they grow up, when they leave school. Whenever they have something they're thinking, how to make a chart, how to put arrows, how to make a flow chart, how to compare and contrast. It really gives them essential skills, and it really helps them understand what you're trying to teach them much more. So let's talk about the three really quickly. Number one, KWL, this is the new one. KWL chart. K stands for know or knowledge. W stands for what I want to know, or for W, you want to know. And L for what I've learned. KWL is an organizing chart that provides a sense of direction for students as they study new topics. The chart asks the students first, let's say at the beginning of a lesson, okay, to write down what they already know about a certain topic, okay? So if I'm talking about a war, for example, or the solar system, what do you know about this particular thing? And everybody would write what they already know. Or what we already know together as a class from a previous lesson. Then, we write what we want to know, or what we expect to learn. Okay, I know some things, what would I like to know? Or what do I expect you to know? It's either them writing it, or you telling them what to write. And finally, list what they have learned as a result of your lesson, and compare what they wanted to know, or what you wanted them to know, to what they have
So
actually
this
learned.
would be done before the lesson, during
During the lesson and at the end.
these
Yes.
two columns before.
Yes.
Yes, and this at the end. Okay, but also here, this can evolve during the lesson. Okay, what I want to know. How, it's an example of what I just said, sense and meaning. So, the Earth revolves around the Sun in an elliptical orbit, and you just go on to something else. So one of them will jot down. What I want to know, what is an elliptical orbit? What is an ellipse? Okay? So now he wrote something that he wants to know. So every time they think of something they want to know from your lesson, they write it down. At the end of the lesson, after they've learned everything, they start writing what they've learned. And if they have questions here that still haven't been answered, they ask you the question. And then we have one chart, perhaps that you already have filled in, photocopied, that you give them at the end. So you give them a chance to make their own chart, and then at the end you give them one with all the information or the basic things that they need to learn. Okay, and this can also be used for the objectives. So I can start at the beginning by giving these two. What do we already know? Brainstorming, questions, discussions, and then I put on the board what we all already know as a class. After that, I tell them, well, today we have the objective of today's lesson is that we want to learn 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the 4 things we want to know today. Write it down. After I finish my lesson, you're making me a test. The students are testing the teacher. After I finish, you tell me, did I do a good job? And explain everything that we needed to know, or did I miss something? So be sure that they have learned the objectives that you want them to learn. Okay? And it can be used as something for homework, for example, as part of a test, where they need to divide, or they need to organize their thoughts to what they already know, what they want to know, and what they know now after doing this particular activity or this particular workshop. Okay? Venn diagram. A Venn diagram represents a relationship between two or more items. Remember, this is very important. Two or more items. Okay, you can't use a Venn diagram for one topic. You can use a KWL for one topic, but a Venn diagram can only be used for two or more. Three, maybe four, maybe five, but it gets more
I
complicated.
used for 4 once and they were kind of confused in the beginning, but after that they could manage.
If if it's a really big unit or a very big chapter and you use four,
No, they had
it's
characters.
confusing. But after a while, it's really nice because they can see the intersection between every two circles. It really organizes all the thoughts that they get.
And
It's a little bit
they
hard.
changed from circles to squares because it looks more
Getting
fun. I said it doesn't matter any shape you can make it, even if it's column. Because if we use this in the...
That's a very good idea. Maybe you can give them everybody can have their own
Yes.
design, maybe hearts. For example.
Yeah,
that's
they
true.
designed it differently, although it's...
Yeah, you'll have boys drawing skulls, for example, girls drawing hearts, but at the end, you're all Venn diagrams.
From PlayStation.
So here's an A, here's a B, and here is what is common between A and B. So for example, let's say we are talking about mammals
Yes.
and sea animals. This is a tricky one. Okay, I use with my students. Okay, now it's not something I explained. It's something on testing, perhaps. I have a Venn diagram here. Here are mammals. Here are sea animals. What is common between them? Sea animals that are mammals, or mammals that are sea animals. Okay. Then you give them a list of animals, and you need to put them in the right place. Okay. Okay. A goldfish. Sea animal. Easy. An elephant. Mammal. Easy. A whale. Here, because it's a mammal and a sea animal at the same time. So I use this to explain the parts where the intersection between two things is kind of tricky. When I explain it this way, they tend to always remember. But when I explain it another way, it's really hard for them to remember that whales, for example, are mammals. So a Venn diagram uses comparison between two things or more. Here you have all the elements of one thing, like mammals, for example. Here you have all the elements of something else, like sea animals. The intersection between both circles or both squares or whatever is what is common in both of them. Something that is mammals and also a sea animal, for example.
I always use that in
What's the intersection?
I always use it with the kids.
Okay, that's a very good idea. That's a natural Venn diagram. Afterwards, we're going to talk about the Frayer model. And let me remind you, we've done this before.
We did it, yes.
Did anybody use it
Yes.
in class?
I used
Okay,
it
great.
for preposition, interjection, and conjunctions.
Do you remember how?
Yeah, I did exactly like this.
Okay,
What
can you
is a
tell me?
preposition?
Okay.
I still have it.
So what's the topic?
What's a preposition?
Prepositions. Okay, so let's take Ms. Vanna's example. Frayer model. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 squares. One big square that has inside of it 5 squares. Here in the middle we have the name of the topic that we're teaching. So it's prepositions. Prepositions like in, on, at, with, by. Prepositions here. Then here we write the characteristics of prepositions.
What is the definition?
The definition of a
They had to
preposition.
write the definition.
Okay, what is a preposition? That is the characteristics of a preposition.
Yeah.
And here,
What it is not.
what it is not.
Yes.
Preposition is not. Like for example, is than a preposition?
Dan?
Is or a preposition?
No, it's a conjunction.
No, so I should use this where?
A non-example.
With a non-example.
This is the only thing that they had a bit of a problem was with the non-examples because they didn't ask, what do you mean it's non-example?
Non-example.
Where should we find the non-examples?
I have a philosophy teacher taking our other course, and he asked me a question last week. He told me, can you give us non-examples of non-examples? I really didn't know what to do then. So I know it's a little bit tricky. Today I was arguing with him that you can sometimes be consistently, deliberately inconsistent. And he agreed. He said, yes, you definitely can. Everybody else didn't understand what we were saying. So basically, why would I use a non-example? I would use it as a teacher in things that I know are confusing. Just like or. I always have this problem when we say prepositions and then they have an or. Okay? They say or, okay, or is a preposition. No, or is not a preposition. But on is a preposition. So in the examples I would use on. But in the non-example I would put or because they're very similar to each other. This way they remember tricky things like this. Okay, great. So you use prepositions, you set characteristics, what it is not, and then you put some examples here for prepositions and some non-examples. Perfect. Okay? Let's talk about mammals and sea animals like we did a little while ago. So we're talking about mammals. Characteristics of a mammal: give birth, breathe oxygen, have lungs. Non-characteristics: they don't lay eggs, they don't have gills, for example. Exactly, they don't fly.
They do.
I don't.
Some
They
of
do.
them
Yeah.
Which bats like the bats?
Then I would put these here exactly. So what are the characteristics? Are they don't fly? No. Sorry. The characteristics. Do I write they fly?
Yes.
No, because it's not common, it's not for
It's
all
not
of them.
common, so I wouldn't write it. Okay. Or I could make an improvisation here of special cases.
Yeah.
Some mammals fly.
Exceptions.
Some mammals live in water. Exactly. Exceptions. Okay. Non-characteristics. They don't have gills and they don't
have feathers.
lay eggs. Maybe don't have feathers. But isn't a dodo a mammal?
What's it?
It's a bird that was extinct. It's a very old bird. It was a mammal. It had feathers. Okay. Or actually, no, laid eggs. Anyways, okay. Examples. I would use my examples and non-examples very wisely when I use a Frayer model, especially because this is the most part where you can teach something. So if I get examples of a mammal, elephant, human being, and then a non-example, goldfish, excuse me, penguin, something like that. It's kind of simple or easy. No, I want to put here the things that are tricky. So I'd write with the examples: an elephant, a lion, simple things, but then I'd include whale, shark,
Shark is a fish, yes.
dolphin.
Dolphin is a fish. Is an animal. That fish or dolphin is a fish.
Okay, so this is we are
So
assigned.
only fish that doesn't lay eggs. The shark. We shark. One of them is an animal.
Yes, one of them is an animal.
The dolphin.
So this is going to be our assignment. See, this is exactly what I mean. There are some things that are confusing. Now I'm going to teach a lesson about mammals and laying eggs and whales and sharks. I know this is confusing for them. It's already confusing for me. I don't just teach it like this, give them the information and leave. Here I have to use something like this to differentiate between the examples and the non-examples, especially when it comes to things that are tricky. Okay? Like bats because they fly. Like whales because they live in water. I should use these with my examples and non-examples. Okay. 5 minutes.